Hello everyone and welcome to another really enjoyable game from round 3 of the FIDE Grand Prix 2022. It's Vidit versus Dubov well, it's a very well balanced game until one player makes a slight inaccuracy and the other one really takes advantage of it nicely. So let's check it out and there will be a very nice pause the video moment. So Vidit with the white pieces opens with knight to f3. He goes for the reti opening and Dubov goes for the symmetrical line. We have knight to f6, g3, g6, bishop to g2 and bishop to g7. We have d4, d5 and c4, and you can't keep the symmetry forever because there's this thing in chess called check. So at some point the symmetry will break. So here we have c6 and now both players castle. So castles and now queen to b3, nicely developing the queen, putting more pressure on the center. Also the b7 pawn is attacked if the light square bishop is developed, and black really wants to develop the light square bishop. So here queen to b6 is what's mostly played here, just offering a queen trade, and then the game continues. However, Dubov plays a5, and it's more of a move that suits his style because you can just play a4 at some point and try and combine this with some other moves. So it's more of a lovely game. So here we have c captures on d5, but the Dubov does not recapture. He plays a4, and okay, the queen now has to move, and best is to just bring the queen back to the starting square, because if you play something like queen to c2, then you can play bishop to f5, attack the queen. It's not very nice. Also, the rook is probably coming to c8 at some point, so the queen is best just brought back to the starting square. We have c captures on d5, Dubov reclaims the pawn, and now knight to c3, continuing development, and queen to a5. So the queen is now nicely developed, and you are already preparing some tricks. For example, if white just plays something like knight e5, it's a useful move. You want to play this at some point. We can play a3, and already the knight on c3 is very weak. So instead, Vidit plays bishop to d2. Now he's threatening some nasty discoveries, but for the moment, you really don't have a good one. So Dubov just continues development. Knight to c6. We have e3 now, and queen to a6. Grabbing hold of this diagonal. Now the discoveries could become a little bit scarier, and now there is a move where a game or two where rook to e1 was played, but Vidit plays the top move recommended by the engine, and that is b3, as it would seem he came very well prepared. So it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. Dubov captures on b3, we have queen captures on b3, again nicely developing the queen to b3, and now Dubov goes knight a5, attacks the queen, says, alright, where are you going to put your queen? Dubov plays, Vidit plays queen b4, Dubov repeats knight to c6, and now Vidit doesn't go queen back to b3 because this is only move 15, and even though it's unlikely that Dubov would go for a repetition so early on in the game, you don't really want to push it. So here, just the queen back to b2, you have to fight for advantage with white, and now bishop to f5. Dubov continues development. We have rook f to c1. As this is the only open file on the board, it's very natural to place your rooks on the open file. Rook f to c8, Dubov does the same, and only now knight to e5. And this is just a beautiful square for the white knight. You don't really want to capture this. Okay, now you can't capture because of tactics. The d5 pawn would be hanging, but you pretty much never want to capture this. So here, queen to a3. Dubov offers a queen trade, and now Vidit trades. We have queen captures, rook captures, and again, he weakens the d5 pawn by playing g4. So he wants to remove one of the defenders, and Dubov has to decide whether to play something like bishop to e6, but that's again going to be met with the g5, and again we're going to remove the defender of the d5 pawn. So instead, Dubov just captures. We have knight captures on g4, knight captures, bishop captures, and now knight captures on d5. So Vidit traded off his g pawn for Dubov's very strong d pawn. Rook c to a8, putting pressure on the a2 pawn, and now knight to b4, defending the a2 pawn, but also offering a trade. However, if you go for this trade, then you will also be giving up the e7 pawn, maybe. For example, captures, captures, and captures, and now we're going to capture on e7. And now black has the b pawn, the passed b pawn, but Vidit would have the passed d pawn, and the d pawn is a little bit stronger here. For example, b5, we're going to play bishop to c6, and now look at this, with this bishop here. Okay, it's it even comes to c6 with tempo as the pawn is attacked. The problem is white's bishops are controlling all of the squares that the passed pawn needs to cross in order to become a queen, and that's just unstoppable. So it's very easy to just push this pawn, and the black will have some issues doing the same. So instead, after knight b4, we have knight to a5, declining the trade. Now rook 8 to b1. Again, there are some tricks. Knight to b3 should win the game, so rook 8 to b1, and now bishop to f8. Not only defending our pawn here, but we are preparing to advance it and then, well, eliminate the defender of the a2 pawn. So here, rook to c7. Again, if your opponent allows it, you have the open file all for yourself. You want to play put the rook on the 7th square. And now e6 is the move you have to play here. And it definitely makes sense, but bishop to e6 is what Dubov played. He said, all right, my e-pawn is defended, let's just play bishop to e6 and pick up the a2 pawn. It doesn't seem like white can stop this really, but there is a move that really allows Vidit to take advantage of this inaccuracy. And I could ask you to pause the video here, but it's too difficult to find it, so I'm gonna show you a few moves and then I'm gonna ask you to pause the video. So here, Vidit plays d5, and okay, the bishop has now been kicked away. You are no longer attacking the a2 pawn. Dubov plays bishop to g4. Now Vidit plays h3. He says, all right, you are running out of squares. Dubov says, no problem, I have all the squares I need. Bishop to f5. It even comes with tempo. I'm attacking your rook. But now comes the move that, again, you had to see, and that is e4. And, well, it's hard to believe that this can even be played, because now, not only is the bishop attacking h3, but since you've moved the pawn from the 3rd rank, the rook is also attacking the h3 pawn. So there's really nothing better. We have to capture the pawn. The bishop captures on h3 is played, and now you will see the move that Vidit saw when he played that pawn push, pawn to d5, and that is bishop to c1. So you had to see all of this in order to play that d5 move. So now the rook is attacked, and all of these squares are covered by white's pieces. The rook cannot keep defending the bishop on h3. So here, Dubov has to give up the exchange. We have bishop captures on a3, and okay, bishop captures on e4. Dubov has 2 extra pawns, so that's compensation in itself. However, rook to e1, attacking the bishop, and now you have to play f5 here in order to just try and survive as black. However, Dubov plays bishop to f5, and now there is only one winning move for Dubov, for Vidit, but it's not easy to spot it, so feel free to pause the video and try to find the only winning idea for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this brilliancy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to, that's not it, it's knight to c2. That's the good stuff, and this is the only move that wins. It's one of the weirder moves that win the game we've seen in a while, but just well, just to give you an example of why it's extremely strong, if you don't play this, let's try to play something else. You want to bring the king into the game. Once black plays e6, that's it. You no longer have any advantage, because it doesn't matter what you play. For example, captures. What do you play now? Let's say now you try knight to c2. We're just going to move the bishop to g7, and black has, well, more than enough compensation. However, after the move in the game, knight to c2, now you have a problem. Now the e7 pawn is hanging, and if the e7 pawn falls, then you have a pass to d pawn, and it's not going to be easy to stop this. And you don't really have a good way of stopping this. If you play something like e6 now, we can just trade bishop captures, rook captures, and now, well, we have all sorts of moves. We can push d6, but even just a nice knight to d4 is enough. If e captures on d5, we can play knight captures on f5, g captures, and now, well, the 2 rooks are just too strong. Black's pawn structure is completely messed up, and that's not possible to defend. Instead, you could try rook to d8. You go after the pawn, makes sense, but we can play knight e3. That's why knight to c2 is also very strong. Now you can defend your pawn, and black's position is just terrible. Let's say bishop to d3, we're going to play something. Bishop to b4 now, attacking the knight, and once you defend it, we're going to play rook e to c1. And now, with white having a dark square bishop, with the knight having a very easy access to the king side, the bishop weirdly placed on f8, there's not much you can do here. For example, h5, we're just going to trade rooks, captures, and now this is a threat. How do you stop this? Let's say king d7, then d6 is coming. And now even after e captures, bishop to c3 check. And now look at this position. King to g8, we have to defend our bishop. Knight d5 coming to f6. This is a game over, or even e7. Yeah, anything can just win here. So instead, after knight to c2, Dubov says, all right, obviously I have to capture the knight. I can't give Vidit a move. So bishop captures on c2 is played. Rook captures on c2, and now comes knight to c4. Again, if you try e6 now, it's simply not enough. We're just going to trade here, or king captures, and we're going to play rook to c7. And, well, that's it. If you capture, then we even grab the 7th rank for ourselves, and that's game over. So after rook captures on c2, knight to c4, again offering some trades, but there is nothing better. Rook captures, we have rook captures on a3, and now even d6. It shows that the pawn no longer matters, that the rooks coming into the game is much too strong. So for example, if captures, just rook e8, if king g7, rook c to c8, you don't even have a square for the bishop, so even that's silly. So after d6, we have e6, stopping this, but now creating a passed d pawn for white. So you can see that Vidit wanted to create a passed d pawn, but then it wasn't even necessary. But just to keep the position alive, Dubov had to allow the creation of the passed pawn. So rook d1, now we have our rook behind our passed pawn. That's well, rook captures on a2 was played, d7, now bishop to e7, there's no way to stop the pawn, you have to give up the bishop, so d8 queen, captures with check, king to g8, now Vidit is just up a rook, and a few more moves were played, rook to d7, going after the pawn here, so rook a5, now we're trying to defend the pawn with rook to f5, but it doesn't matter, rook f4, Dubov defended, we have rook captures on f5, e captures on f5, and now f4, or pretty much any other move, and it was in this position. On move 43, that Daniil Dubov resigned the game, and a brilliant victory for Vidit here, who spotted that after Dubov's after this move was played, that he had this, but it's such a long line, and you really had to figure out, because you can't just play d5. If it doesn't work, it's going to be a liability. So you had to see all of that, plus bishop to c1 with an attack on the rook, and that the rook will not be able to defend the bishop here. So really crazy stuff. Really awesome that Vidit saw all of this, and then he found the only winning move, knight to c2, that allows him to create a passed pawn, but not really. But then in the end, it was inevitable. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Vidit. I would like to thank Medo for breaking into the room at the precise right moment. Triple Triangle, Daniel Silverberg, John Black, and Patrick Mulcair for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this magnificent event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.